Hallam, Nebraska is a quiet little village in the southeastern part of the state. At first glance, it looks as if this town has always been a peaceful place. One would hardly be able to tell that nearly 14 years ago, much of the town was completely destroyed by a tornado.
Well, we have been teachers for 40-some years, and we had been missionaries to Indonesia on the island Dutch New Guinea. And in 1980, we came home, but our two girls came home ahead of us, and they ended up at the university and said, you know, when you come home to stay, just come to Nebraska and make it your home. And I said, why? There's only Indians that live out there. We're from Pennsylvania. And anyway, that's why we located here. And then we did some teaching here at public school. She went out to Lincoln Christian and I went out to Malcolm and finished out our career in that. And at that point, about 1987, we had been going to Rosemont Church, but then we switched over because it was having a problem, and we ended up at Berea in about 1987, thereabouts. And I got involved in teaching the adults, the older adults at the church. And so we were involved in that until after the tornado, and then it was that life change after that. But the girls both married farmers, one in Tecumseh, Levon Heidemann, former lieutenant governor, and our other daughter, Candy, married a rancher down in Pawnee City area. And our son lives up the street, as you know. He's teaching also. All three are teachers. So we're pretty well located here in Nebraska. We won't be leaving Nebraska. Not anytime soon, anyway.
What got us to Hallam is we wanted to get out of the city of Lincoln, and we knew the Swanigers who owned some land down there, and he always wanted a log house, so we decided that would be a great place to build a log house, and we thought live the rest of our lives there.
The date is May 22nd, 2004. It is a Saturday morning. Just to the northeast of Hallam sits an all but empty Norris Public School. School has just gotten out for the year, and summer break is in full swing.
My name's Philip Severson, and I'm actually a 1984 graduate of this school. And outside of 3 years teaching in the Clark County school system, which is part of the Las Vegas area, I taught there for 3 years, and then when Mr. Grossands gave me an opportunity to come back, I jumped at it. So this is my 25th year back here. So I've been in this area a long time. Since the tornado was in the evening, I don't really remember much in the morning. It's probably Saturday. Since it's Saturday, I probably didn't get up real early, and then had a little bite to eat. And since school had got out that day before, and then we were going to check out on Monday, at that time it was like one of those, if you were ready to check out, you could check out and you'd be done. So I was out there finishing up grades, getting the room clean. So all my checkout procedures were done. Unlike my room looks now, it looks like maybe a tornado hit it. But I had everything getting cleaned up. So just spent a lot of time getting everything ready so I would be ready to check out on Monday. I went out, it was probably a little bit afternoon, and it was bright, sunshiny day, beautiful, not a cloud in the sky when I went out. And over in the high school building, there's no windows, so I had no idea what was going on. And I didn't watch the weather earlier in the day, and I didn't have a TV on or anything. I was playing a CD.
The day is hot and sunny. The National Weather Service has issued a high-risk alert for severe thunderstorms. This includes tornadoes. This is not out of the ordinary, though, as severe thunderstorms are common in the state during the spring and summer months. As evening approaches, thunderstorms begin firing in southwestern Nebraska and begin tracking towards the northwest. An isolated storm fires along the Kansas-Nebraska border near Hebron, Nebraska. As it moves off to the northwest, it rapidly intensifies and soon becomes what is known as a supercell. At 7:30 p.m., just west of Dakin, Nebraska, a funnel forms within the storm and slowly drops out of the sky. Shown here is real footage of the tornado as it forms near Dakin. You can clearly see the rotation within this storm. Tornado sirens blare within the town. Thankfully, the town of Dakin is spared a direct hit as the tornado misses the town to the north. When the tornado is directly north of the town, another smaller satellite tornado forms and touches down south of the larger tornado. For a brief time, we have two tornadoes on the ground. The tornado is still in its infancy and is reported to be between F0 and F1 intensities as it moves 2 miles north of Swanton, Nebraska. Very small amounts of damage are reported. The storm closes in on Wilbur, Nebraska, where the tornado intensifies to an F2. Roof damage is reported in the town as it brushes the east side. Not only has the tornado strengthened, but it has also widened. The storm moves towards Hallam. It begins to intensify again into an F4 storm.
It was a Saturday, and we had a wedding to attend and reception. So we went uptown to the wedding to her very close friend that works at the church. And we came home, it was about 7:45 when we were coming back to Hallam. And we could see, as we were approaching Hallam, I could see over toward Claytonia. I told her, I said, there's a major storm coming. I said, look at that sky, it's totally black. I thought it was a shear wind, is what I thought it was, a shear storm. And we had not heard anything about tornadoes coming. I just figured it was a major storm. So as we were going up Gage Road to our house, it was just pouring down rain, hardest I've ever experienced. Pulled into the driveway, pulled up to the front of the truck, or front of the garage, and we jumped out, and she ran in the house, and the phone was ringing. And until I got in the house, she got to the phone. It was our son living up here in Lincoln. He says, you guys have got to get into the basement. He said, you got to, there's a tornado, it's in Claytonia, it's heading right for your house. So we ran upstairs and changed our clothes, put on shorts and t-shirt and sneakers and whatever, and grabbed our vital boxes, our important boxes, ran all the way to the basement, put them in the southwest corner, because I was always top, always the southwest corner. So we located there, and then we were looking out our big windows out over our reservoir, which was about 300 yards from the house, south and west. And that storm, we could just see this huge black sky coming right at us. Still, I hadn't thought tornado, except that Scott said it was a tornado. Found out the tornado, we were actually looking at the tail, 2.5 miles wide. And then according to Dewey at the university, a climatologist, was telling us that that storm came out of Claytonia and came right over our house and reservoir, and sat there for about 2 to 3 minutes and just spun. Well, while it was coming across our reservoir, we were standing down there watching it, the wind picked up tremendously. And we had just put in 2 new French doors on the south wall on the main floor. And all of a sudden I hear these doors just banging. I said, oh my goodness, our doors, our new doors, I need to get them closed. Not even thinking, stupid, we go running up the steps out of the basement to the main floor, to the south wall, right where the storm was coming from. And we're trying to close these doors, and the wind was so strong we couldn't close the doors. And just all of a sudden, the house exploded. Just literally exploded. She was on the west door and I was on the east door. And the wind just hit that house and just exploded those logs, picked me up and tossed me through the great room about 30 feet. I was going like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I was totally out of control. Hit the wall of the bedroom at the other end of the great room. Hit the wall, fell to the floor. She was picked up and carried around the dining area, around the bar of the kitchen, and thrown into what eventually we found out was the main bath. And I had no idea what happened to her. I was screaming as I was tumbling through the air. She was gone. I had no idea what happened to her. So I hit the floor and I thought, I've got to get in a doorway. So the bathroom door, the main bath door, was right there. So I crawled over, anchored inside that, and then all of a sudden the wall fell right on me and just kept piling logs up on top of me. I was gonna die, I knew it. And I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe very good. I was all curled up under there. And I just kept thinking, whatever happened to her, I had no idea. And it just seemed like an eternity. And and then the wind kind of died down a little bit, the noise a little bit, not much, but a little. And then I heard her voice hollering. And I thought to myself, well, how did you get downstairs? You know, you're here, but how did you get downstairs? And so when I heard her voice, I just started pushing with all my might, and I was praying, Lord, I know I'm coming to heaven, but help me find her. So I started pushing, and as I pushed and wiggled my head, finally I was able to actually push my head through some of the logs, and I looked out, and I looked up, and the lightning was so intense, it was like twilight. And I could see her about 10 feet from me, face down, arm over her head, like this, as she was lying on the floor, nothing around her. Everything was gone, everything. The stove, the refrigerator, the freezers, the cabinets, everything was gone, blown, totally sucked off the floor. And yet she was laying there.
Occasionally you could hear thunder, but I mean, it's like, yeah, you hear thunder a lot of times. And some other people earlier in the day, but they had all gone by the time the tornado hit in the evening. After the power went out, we have flashlights in our room, so I was looking for my flashlight so I could finish things up. And then that's about the time, at that time, my room was, at that time it was the middle school office, which is now the weight room area of the high school. The front glass doors I heard break, and then I heard the fire doors blow open and shut with the pressure change. And I just went back interior wall and sat down at my chair by my desk, because that was our procedure then. We didn't have a tornado safe room. It was to go to an interior wall and sit down. I didn't cover anything, but I remember sitting down on a chair and just waiting. And it really didn't take long to pass, but it was like pretty intense. And then after it passed, I thought, this isn't good. And you go out and look, and there's water running down in. And I could see a couple areas, there's holes in the ceiling. I went back towards the cafeteria, and you could see sky and the cafeteria area. So I said, well, you can't go that way.
Sure.
And it's like, just kind of sit and do a little praying, do a little crying, a little more praying, a little more crying. Like the ceiling tiles were down, wires were hanging down in, and it was more just the water running in. So now there was debris starting to pile up in the hallways and stuff.
She had her puppy dog, a little rag doll, back in the washroom. He was sucked out and wrapped around a tree. Our grandson found him next morning dead, hanging up the tree. So everything was there. So when I saw her, I just kept pushing until I got myself out, crawled over to her, and I tented over top of her. And I was screaming in her ear, because it was just, the noise was deafening, just deafening. It was like you're under the 727 full blast. It was just incredible. And I said, we need to get off the floor, we need to get off the floor. And she said, well, I can't move. She said, I broke my hip. She said, I broke my pelvis. I said, oh my goodness, we got to get off of the floor. She said, well, where are we? I said, well, I think we're somewhere between the kitchen and the bathroom, but I'm not sure, but here's the commode, so we must be close to the bathroom. So I decided to start crawling across all the debris and glass and broken stuff, and I started heading toward what I thought was the wall of the kitchen on the west side of the house. And I get over to the edge of the foundation, and all the logs had been blown out, so there's no walls at all, it's just all gone. And I turned to her and I said, yes, here, let me help you. Come to me and I'll pull you. And she said, no, don't do that. She says, I broke my shoulder too. And I said, well, we've got to get off the floor. So she is, and I don't know how she did it, she starts crawling across all this debris and glass and everything. About where she was lying, about another 20 feet from her was the dining area. And the floor had actually collapsed into the basement where we were going to be stationed. And later, when the kids took pictures, all the stuff from upstairs was from the floor up to from the floor of the basement to the floor of what would have been the dining room. We would have been crushed to death with all the stuff. So anyway, she works her way over to the foundation, and in the meantime, I crawl off the foundation and I start pushing logs. And I made a space probably about 4 foot wide. And I said, just come down in this hole, get down in behind these logs. So here she is, broken pelvis in 3 places, broken shoulder, all kinds of lacerations and contusions, but she falls down in the hole, And as she falls down in the hole, she falls down in on her legs and hands like this. And then she lands on a 2x4. There's a 2x4 laying in there. And she lands down over it like this. And I crawled in behind her, crawled down in the hole, and tried to tent over her again to protect her from the rain and the sleet. And she starts hollering, "No, no, no." She says, something's hurting me, something's hurting me. So I reach under her behind, and I found two 16-penny spikes sticking in her legs. So I bent those down with my thumb. I bent those down with my thumb, and then we kind of tented in there for a while, and I kept telling her, there'll be another tornado. I said, there's always at least two. And sure enough, another one did come through, very small, but it did come through. So we tucked down in there, and after a while, an hour or so, I decided, well, I know there's a blanket in the truck, because that's what we had driven down, was the Tundra. And so I crawled out of the hole, down over the logs, worked my way through around the acreage, around the house, to the front of the house, to where the garage was, and there sat the truck, totally demolished. Big log right down through the cab. And I reach in through the window, broken windows, and I find this blanket. Well, the blanket's soaking wet. But I pulled it out and I wrapped it around me, and I looked out toward our road, out the driveway to the gravel road, of the Gage Road, and I saw our Odyssey, our van, sitting way out there down in the prairie, just a ways. And I thought, I wonder if I could get that started. So I go walking over to the van, because the key was in it. And I crawled in, I turned on, it started, and then I thought, I can't go anywhere, there's 4 flat tires.
Well, I go out thinking, well, I got to get out of here, But my truck had been pounded with rocks from off the roof, so it was not drivable. All the windows were blown out of it. Rocks had blown into the radiator. It didn't get flipped or anything, but it got moved probably 15, 20 feet. And so I was like, well, and I didn't take a cell phone with me, so I just waited around, and then about, I don't know if it was 3 hours later, some other people come that had been thinking this was going to be a staging area, and they knew at that time another cell was in the area, so they were coming in looking for shelter, and then somebody gave me a ride back to Hickman. Originally, when Hallam got hit, Norris was going to be the staging area for the people that were recovering, but then after Norris got hit, they moved it to Southwest.
So I sat there for a couple of minutes, got out, turned it off, came back around, crawled back down in there, took the blanket and pulled it up over both our heads. Soaking wet, but at least it was protection. After a little bit, I said, "Oh, do you smell that lagoon?" I said, "That lagoon is terrible." Come to find out,
I knew it wasn't the lagoon, it was the gas tank.
Propane.
Propane tank that was under the porch. And he kept covering my head, and I kept uncovering my head. He never did know until the next day that I told him
no
what
idea.
it was.
No idea.
Because he decided that he would go for help. And I was sort of glad, because then I could take the blanket off and leave it off of my head. So I didn't have to smell it quite so
I
strong.
figure the storm hits like 8:45, thereabouts, or something like that. And it was around 2 o'clock in the morning when she finally said, "Can you walk?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've been out to the truck." I said, "What do you want?" She says, "Well, nobody knows we live down here." I said, "Oh, honey," I said, "there's 100 vehicles up there, searchlights." I said, "Someone will come." No, 5 hours we sat in that hole, freezing to death. It was so cold. And finally she says, "Please go get some help." So I said, all right. So I took my blanket, and a piece of the blanket, and I wrapped it around me, and I climbed out of the hole again, and I worked my way through our yard all the way out to Gage Road. And I got out there, and I thought, no, I can't go east because the creek has flooded all halfway up the hill, so I'll drown in that. So I'll go up to the railroad tracks that goes up to the power station, and I'll follow the tracks up to Hallam. So I go walking up there. Never once did I think about following wire lines. Never thought about the wire lines. So I'm walking up there, and I'm praying, and I'm saying, "Lord, help me get some help." I get to the railroad tracks, and I see it's a flood. It's a river And I thought, I don't dare go up the railroad tracks, I'll break my ankles. And then I thought, well, up on the hill, there's a service road. So I kept going another 50 feet or so. Got up on the roof, up on the service road, and started headed straight for Hallam. I was tripping over barbed wire, broken glass, it was a flood, the fields were all flooded, and the train cars, the coal cars, were empty, but they were all twisted and bent and leaning toward where I was walking. And I could hear them creaking. And I just kept praying, Lord, don't let these cars fall on me because they'll crush me. And I got about 3/4 of the way up the service road, and one of them had actually fallen over. So I was blocked from a field of water, the train cars, and the one in front of me, and I was stopped. I couldn't go any further. So I just started screaming at the top of my voice, help, help, help. One rescue guy had decided to actually come down to the southernmost part of the town, and he was in a house, and we met him that summer, and he said he thought he heard a voice echoing up through the service road. So he got 9 other rescue guys, and they start down the track with their lights, and I'm still screaming my head off, and all of a sudden on the other side of the coal cars I see the lights, and I kept saying, I'm over here, I'm over here. And so they said, well, can you come through the cars? I said, I don't want to. But I did. I climbed up on the connections, and I'm sitting there. And they were telling us, we had a pizza party for them that summer. And they were telling us, they said, Bob, we thought you were insane. I said, why? He said, well, now think about it. Here you are, you're soaking wet, you're bleeding all over the place, you have a piece of blue cloth around you, and you're talking about a woman under a log. I said, now what do you think? I said, yeah, I guess that would be pretty strange. So anyway, the 4 ladies, took me and said, well, we're taking you on up to Hallam to get on a bus, to get up to Southwest to get you to the hospital. I said, what about my wife? Well, we're gonna call in a helicopter. I said, all right, well, you go down the track about a mile, take a left, go over the hill, you'll see what was a house. Alongside of the foundation, she's down under some logs. So they took off that way, and the others took me up to Hallam, and I kept thinking, oh my goodness sakes, I hope they get to her. I remember when the 4 ladies walked me up into Hallam, and we were going to take a right, go east to the bus. I looked to the left, and the floodlights, there were floodlights everywhere. So I could see the little town, and it looked like Berlin after the war. It really did. I mean, just pieces of buildings and broken down. It was incredible. So I get to Hallam, and this is one of the funny parts of this now. I get to Hallam, and there's just a whole line of us refugees. We look like a bunch of refugees, all heading toward a National Guard bus. And I'm standing there. This fellow behind me has his cell phone. I said, is your phone working? He said, yeah. I said, would you call my son? So he called my son, and I got my daughter-in-law. She said, well, he's down at Southwest waiting for you guys. I said, well, I'll be there, but Mom won't. She's still down under the logs, and the phone went dead. So then we get to the bus, and we're sitting on the bus, and there's this dear old lady, bless her heart. She's sitting right next to me. Very old lady, even older than me. And I was striking up conversation. And I said, how did you survive your house? Well, she said, I was in the house, and she said, my daughter called and said a storm was coming, and she said I was to get in the bathroom because I didn't have a basement. So she said, I went in the bathroom and crawled in the tub. And she said, all of a sudden my house started shaking. She says, and the house started falling apart, but I was in the tub and I was okay. And I thought that was pretty funny, she crawled in that tub. Then they brought me up to Southwest, and I kept asking everybody, have you heard about my wife? Heard about my wife? No, haven't heard anything. In the meantime, she's having an experience of her own.
Yeah, the rest of them came down. I saw the flashlights, so I yelled and says, well, I'm back here. So they come back, and by then I'm freezing. So a couple of them took off their coats, says, we're gonna drop these on you and at least try to get you warm. And then they says, we're going to pull you out of the hole, but it's going to hurt. And I asked them, well, what else is new? and then they got a 6-panel door was the only thing they could find to put me on. And they carried me out to the road and wondered, well, what are we going to do now? You know, they had a hard time just walking down without carrying somebody on a door. And we see lights coming down the road. Well, everything is flooded.
Everything's flooded.
And it was these guys from Ashland in this Dodge Durango, and they stopped them. Otherwise, they would have gone right into the river.
Right into the lake.
And they said, we're taking your vehicle, turn it around. So they did, and so they put me in the back. And
Well, tell them about the guys, their condition.
The guys were so drunk they didn't know where they were.
They didn't have a
But
clue. How they got there is beyond
But they
anybody's
had
imagination.
heard about the tornado hitting, and they decided they'd go see about it. So they were just driving around trying to find what all had happened. So anyway, they put me in the back of it, and they headed up. Well, they couldn't get across the road to Hallam, so we kept going. I don't know
west,
how.
to Mill Creek.
Yeah,
quite a ways.
yeah, and then turned toward Lincoln, and they said, well, we can't get down to Hallam, so we'll just keep going to Lincoln. Well, it was the longest trip I ever took to Lincoln because we were all over the countryside because they would come someplace, the road was blocked, the road was flooded, and finally I said, you know, how much longer till we get to Lincoln? Well, they said, it shouldn't be long now, we're almost there. I mean, this was after about an hour, which takes 20 minutes at the longest to get from our, and finally they got me up, took me to
Down to Bryan
West. And they said, well, this is where we're going to take you. And so I said, well, fine. So they took me in. They, of course, put me in a bed. And then,
in the meantime, I'm in the hospital, and I'm asking the nurses, every nurse I see, they're cleaning me up, and I'm saying, have you found my wife? Have you found my wife? Now, this was by 6 o'clock in the morning, and I still hadn't seen her. And they said, no, not yet. And pretty soon this one nurse walks in my room and says, I think we may have found your wife. And I said, good, where is she? Well, we have a lady down the hall. I said, you just wheel my bed down there and I'll tell you it's my wife. So they wheeled me down and they put me in the doorway, and there she lay. She was just, she didn't even look like herself. Her legs looked like moguls in Colorado. Her hair was just all bloody. She was blue, black and blue all over. And she was laying there, and big smile on her face. And the 2 girls were standing behind her crying.
and I wondered why. I was there.
Yeah. And so we had a nice reunion at that point in time.
I was on the east side of the building. The west side of the building was definitely hit harder. Coming west-east, the building could withstand some of the blow. It was dark. It was more the damage you could see was when you were inside, but it was more the fact that it was just raining so hard then. The scariest part was how am I going to get home now that my truck doesn't go and I don't have a cell phone? As it turned out, you got to thinking, I was like, the next morning you could always, I mean, a 4-mile walk you could have done, but at that time it's like, how am I going to get out of here? Or is somebody going to come find me? Well, and I know later that night there were several people way later in the night that had come to start checking things out. Whether it was law enforcement or school board members or Dr. Baker, I think, had come out, so because they'd heard it had been hit. I said the other thing, it's on totally clear afterwards. I says, Hallam, devastating, terrible school, terrible destruction. I said, people don't realize from here it still kept going clear almost to Palmyra, and I says, dollar value damage of some of those acreage houses was astronomical. That there were $700,000-800,000 houses that had to be pushed in. That a lot of people, those are the ones that kind of get left out of the mix that people don't realize because it clipped the edge of Holland and then kept going through the country. There's a lot of people out in the country that lost their entire house. So losing a school building, not as tragic to me as losing your house.
So then she spent 5 days at Bryan West, and then they took her to Madonna for another 10 days. The State Farm was our agent, and they were fantastic. Oh my goodness sakes! But they put us up in Wilderness Ridge apartment area there, and they gave us 2 years, but we only spent 1. And in the meantime, while we were there, then we decided to design a house and have a. And then in the meantime, the kids told me, they said, well, you're not going back down to Hallam for at least 3 weeks. And we wanted to make sure that you're adjusted and so on and so forth. So I didn't see the house at all for 2 to 3 weeks before they took us back down. And that was an incredible experience. Oh my goodness sakes. Scott took me down, and we were going down the back road to come into where our house was. And I saw this huge ball of metal, just a great big ball. And I said to him, Scott, what's that sitting along the side of the road? He said, well, it's a car. And sure enough, there were the headlights, but it had just all been rolled into a great big ball of steel. And then all the other things I had seen down there, it was just incredible. So then we come up over the hill, and then my first view of the house was nothing but a foundation and logs everywhere. I mean, those logs were totally exposed. The main log of the house, the top beam, was 18 inches in diameter and 44 foot long, and they found it a mile north toward Hallam, in a field, just laying there. That's a huge log to be thrown that far. As far as our place, the double door refrigerator freezer combination was sucked off the floor, never found. We had 300 people from the church went down and cleaned our acreage, never found that. I had our camper was equipped and ready to go the next Saturday, the next weekend for Scott to go camping, and all they ever found were the wheels. Never found any more of it. And the one Schwaniger boy, he lived about half a mile northeast of us on his farm. He had an 18-wheeler. All they found was the chassis. So then the kids, then after it was all over and Mom was getting better, then they said, well, we want you to sell the acreage and move over to Hickman or move someplace, but get out of Hallam. So we put the place up for sale and sold it just like that, all 14 acres. Someone got a steal, trust me.
And we have no business.
Yeah, we should be
living through
dead.
that.
We really should be dead. Because as the logs kept falling, just piling on top of me. I mean, we're talking logs now, and I was all curled up like this, and I took my glasses off like this, and I laid them down, and I told that Sunday. Then on Sunday, Levon and Scott were going to go down try to get into the house. And I said, well, if you get in, I said, you know where the main bath was? Yeah. I said, okay, I was under a wall. I said, dig under there because my billfold's under there and my glasses are under there. So they went down, and they came back that evening, and they said, Dad, there's no way you could have been under that. I said, why? They said, it took 4 men to lift enough log to get in and under it, and one of them was a football player from the university. I said, well, it was God and me that got me out of there, and that's all. That was it. I mean, I heard her voice, and I thought, I've got to get to her. I got to get to her and see what's going on. So it was pretty incredible.
But it was ridiculous things that were in place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, the bar was gone. There was a stool sitting there that I had put my purse on. The stool was there with my purse.
And the purse was still
sitting
on
it. Schwaniger's on up, their house was demolished, but the kitchen table was there, and she had a bowl and pitcher sitting on it, and it was sitting there. But the rest of the house was gone.
And up in our loft where the master suite was, in the bathroom, in the master bath, we had an antique table, and we had an antique bowl and pitcher. They found the bowl and pitcher out in a field, not a chip. Perfectly all right, just sitting out there. It's incredible. Just strange things, just really bizarre.
The auditorium side, you know, because those walls were caved in, and you could see into the red chairs of the auditorium. Well, at first, when I saw part of it on, like I said, over the auditorium side, I was really thinking they were going to push part of it in, and we'd have to rebuild. But you know, I think it was Sampson Construction, and actually it was a high school classmate of mine was the construction foreman on it, and they were able to get it back and going. I said, the fortunate thing is when they first built the building, they did so much out of concrete. It was a lot more stable. You know, if there had been a lot of wood siding and things like that, it'd have been twigs. You know, it'd just been blown up. So, but I said, and now there's really nothing on campus that's over 14 years old as far as infrastructure, you know, air conditioning, wiring for electrical and anything like that. Everything on campus is 14 years or less because everything pretty much got gutted and redone. The auditorium corner wall and then the part of the west side over what would be the Spanish room areas now. Part of that was laid in. That was the old front entrance. So they had to redo the front entrance on the west side. One of the school vans was on the concession stand. I think there was a bus on the football field. I said the funniest thing was about the outside though was the football field. They'd cut down the old press box because it was deemed to be unsafe. They said the poles were unsafe. That was the only 4 poles left standing. The light poles all got bent down. The bleachers were mangled. The press box that they cut down, I don't even know where that ended up. It was just an old tin box. But those 4 poles were still standing, even though they were deemed to be structurally unsafe. When you're looking, I think it ended up being $35 million worth of damage. Just knowing that you weren't going to be able to get stuff, you know, the fact that, I mean, they took and tried out every paper that they could. I'm glad we were well insured because everything got put back the way it was. I mean, it was tough watching them go through book by book by book, and it's like, just get rid of them and go new. But they had to, from the insurance side, if it was salvageable, it was saved. If it wasn't, then it was replaced. I know the one day that we had volunteers come in my area was the softball field, and you just walked it back and forth, picking up rocks and glass and nails. You had to have work gloves on, and then they just took a group of people, this is your area, walk it back and forth, walk it back, because to get the outdoor areas playable and things like that, all that stuff had to get off. So there was a lot of walking back and forth. It affected a lot of people, kids. You know, I heard the kids, oh, the tornado slide is gone. Yep, tornado slide is gone. The people came together and helped and pitched in, and not just North. I mean, several other schools came and helped, and you know, Southwest opened their doors so kids could go up there and use their weight training facilities. Other Lincoln schools helped out with coming in, running camps and things like that. Panama opened up their softball field. I think the first couple of softball games were played over there. So one small blessing in disguise is people put on a golf fundraiser called the Titan Twister thing. Well, then that led into the foundation taking that over. So there's been a foundation golf tournament ever since that raises money for scholarships. So that's a little small blessing that's come out of it. Now, once they did the rebuild, along with this new building and I believe the intermediate building, there are tornado safe rooms built in that are reinforced concrete and blast doors. So we can actually get in our middle school building, we could get 600 people in our 4 computer labs that are reinforced or more. Because at one time we had the 5th grade in here too. We could get 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th all in those 4 computer labs. And there's probably 150 kids per grade in there.
But we felt, we realized right on, immediately, that the Lord had saved our lives. And of course you always question, well, why? Well, having been missionaries and being involved in the church, well, when I was a kid, my mother always told everybody that I was going to be her preacher someday, and I said, no way.
So
well,
we
then
thought the missionary part would take care of it.
Yeah, we thought maybe the missionary part. So we went to Indonesia for 10 years and lived among on the island of what used to be Dutch New Guinea. It was a cannibalistic island. And so we lived there for 10 years with the kids. Well, then we came home, and I was content just to teach, and that was it in the church. Well, then that was in May, and then in September, Mark Kramer at the church came to us and asked if we would step up as part-time pastor of Senior Life. And I said, no. And then we prayed about it. We really did pray about it. And we realized this is why God saved our lives. For us to be ministers of the Word, minister to people. And so we were hired as part-time pastors, both of us. And we were asked if we could do 20 hours a week. Well, we do about 45 hours a week part-time. And we're just going full bore, and we love it. And we realize this is why the Lord spared our lives. And so when people say, you're 80 years old. When are you going to retire? I said, when the Lord takes me home. It's probably the greatest experience of survival that we had, even living on an island where cannibals lived. We survived an isolated island of Stone Age life. Food was very rare to get any decent kind of food for 10 years, but we survived that, serving the Lord. And so we really believe this is what the Lord had for our lives. And so,
But he had to knock us on the head.
had to knock us on the head a little bit.
Watch the weather before you head out. I think as you get older, no matter what, you're more vigilant about what the weather is. And I think one thing is they predict things sometimes incorrectly further out. But, I have an idea like tomorrow there's a chance of snow. So we're kind of monitoring that, what's the chance of snow. And then they're talking next Tuesday because we have a track meet. Well, it's supposed to be 47 and rain. Is that where we want to go a track meet? But that's one of those things I watch. Part of it is because now that I do the middle school AD stuff, I watch the weather a lot more. But just a little more vigilant watching forecasts.
I think just the realization that we were truly in the hands of the Lord. I mean, we had no control over anything. Everything that night was out of control. And I had accepted the fact that I was heading for heaven. That's all there was to it. But God said, no, I have work for you to do. And I think for me, has helped me to rest in the promise He never leaves us nor forsakes us. And that His will be done in spite of ourselves. I would never have applied for a job as a preacher at a big church. I never would have done that. I'm teaching a class at the church and have been for years, but our class has escalated to about 85 to 90 people, a Bible class I have every Sunday. And that's twice the number of people in my little church in Pennsylvania when I was growing up. So, God has a purpose and a will, and to realize when we come on to, when I come on to situations even now, even like today or yesterday or whenever, and they seem insurmountable, then I can think back, but what did God bring you through? This is nothing compared to that. And it really reinforces my faith in the Lord that He's going to take care of us. I think that it helps me, it helps the both of us really, we've talked about it many times. It helps us to realize that day by day we are in the hands of the Lord. We really should be in heaven right now. But to realize when we feel tired and we feel, do I really want to go up and serve people today, go to the nursing homes? Yes, I do need to do that. I do need to do that. This is what the Lord spared our lives for. And 10 minutes in a nursing home with a dear soul that's lonely is worth a lifetime to them. And as I tell people on our visiting team, I tell them when you go, you don't need to worry about sitting there for an hour. Give them 10 minutes. But before you leave, always tell them you'll be back. I said that gives them hope. That gives them something to look forward to, because that's a lonely, lonely life in those nursing homes. And so when we feel a little tired and we feel, do we want to do it again today? And we say to each other, yes, we need to do this. This is what the Lord spared our lives for. So, and say
before the tornado, I couldn't even get him to go visit somebody in the hospital. He hated hospitals.
I hated hospitals. It was just something eerie about it. I didn't like it. But now we're there all the time. Emergencies, middle of the night, I'll get a call. I'll go to the hospital. I don't have a problem with it now. But no, I think that's the thing that has helped me. Though I've been a missionary, I've been a teacher of the Bible and all, but I think through this experience, I think I have been drawn closer to the Lord and more sensitive to the leading of the Spirit of God for my life. And I believe one day the Lord will say it's time. Probably one of the things that I would say to most anyone is get your eyes off yourself and your own ambition and make sure you're sensitive to the leading of the Lord. Because the Lord may have what you consider a mundane job, but the job that the Lord wants you to do is going to affect someone else for eternity. And that's very, very important. That's very important.